the Instructor Podcast with Terry Cook, talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.
Welcome to the Instructor Podcast. As always, I am your splendid host, Terry Cook, and I'm delighted to be here, and even more delighted that you have chosen to listen. This is a show where I speak to leaders, experts, innovators, and game changers to look at ways that we can help you improve your driving school and potentially become an even more awesome instructor. And today, of course, is no different. We are joined by former ADI, current bookkeeper, and author David Shannon, and we are talking about business plans, tax, and why we should potentially put more attention to what car we actually get as driving instructors. But that's what's coming up on today's show. And just before we dive in, I just want to take a moment to remind you to click subscribe wherever you are listening to, whether that's Spotify, Apple, or Google, or anywhere else. Click subscribe so whenever we release new or bonus episodes, they drop straight into your feed. And if you're feeling kind enough on those platforms, go and leave us a nice little 5-star review if you're feeling particularly generous. But for now, let's dive into the show. So this week on the Instructor Podcast, I am joined by Dave Shannon, who is a former ADI. He is the owner at Driverhead Bookkeeping, and he wrote the book, Are You Ready for Business? So how are we doing, Dave?
Yeah, great, Terry. Thank you very much. You?
All the better seeing your smiley face, and it's a pleasure to have you on, especially after I've quite recently read your book and took an awful lot from it. But before we get into that, and I do want to get into that, but before we do, I like to ask all my guests a very challenging question to begin with, which is the tagline for this show is that I speak to leaders, experts, innovators, and game changers. I'm just wondering which one or ones are you? Leader, expert, innovator, or game changer?
I'd like to say expert.
So, expert in what?
An expert in knowing what's involved in terms of delivering good advice to driving instructors and to my clients in general. Good financial sound advice.
Excellent. I'm very impressed with the number of people that regard themselves as experts at the minute, because there's a bit of a fuss online recently about that word, and I quite like the fact that people are owning up to being an expert in a specific thing. So as I said, you wrote the book, Are You Ready for Business? And I got stuck into that recently, and I enjoyed it, and it got me thinking about some of the stuff I wish I'd known at the time when I first become an instructor. And I think I even said to you, I wish I'd had this book when I first become an instructor. And it would have stopped me making some of the mistakes I made. So I kind of want to ask you the question, sort of thinking back to when you were an ADI, what was the biggest mistake do you think you made as a driving instructor?
I think in the early days, it was financial planning, being self-employed for the first time, understanding the tax liabilities, saving enough rather than having that bill in January and going, oh shit, where am I going to pay that bill from? Just not knowing enough about the finances at the outset, I guess.
And do you think that's what kind of taking you down the path you're on now around the bookkeeping side of it?
Yeah, it's something I've always had an interest in. I almost did accountancy at university, but went down different routes and then decided to sort of revisit that angle of profession, if you like. And yeah, it's just good to help other businesses and get them to understand so hopefully they don't make the same errors I did.
I think it's interesting if we should line us up with each other, because I was thinking about my biggest mistake as an instructor. And I think that one of my biggest mistakes was listening to other people that were adamant about a certain thing with no nuance. You know, things like, you never need to market, you just live off referrals, and all franchises are bad and all this kind of stuff. And it was like black and white. And, you've said about the financial planning side, and that's the path you've taken. And for me, I've taken the path of, I want to give information. I want to give both sides of the story. I want to let people choose. And that, I find it interesting that we speak about those mistakes. It's kind of paralleled what we've done going forward. But do you think that, looking at that as when we came into industry as instructors and instructors come into industry now, do you think they look at the job as a business Do you think or do you think that's a weak point in the industry? People don't view it like they're running a business.
Yeah, no, I would say people generally come in just thinking it's a job, probably knowing that they're going to work for themselves. But I think even those initially that come in and take a franchise from early days don't see themselves still as self-employed or having their own business. And I guess that was sort of one of the reasons of writing the book in the first place, is because we get your part one, your part two, your part three training, but there's a very little business training. So just because you're a good instructor doesn't mean you're great at business.
Why why do you think there's so little training? Because a lot of people obviously come in through franchises and so forth. And
Mm-hmm.
people know I came in through Red, and I'm going to be very careful what I say here. Um, I got some, but I had to learn a lot for myself as well. So,
Mm-hmm.
in your opinion, why do you think there's so little provided?
Um, I don't know, to be honest. I guess it could be the fact of like when you join a franchise, they want you to stay there. They don't want you to go off and set up on your own. Especially the big national franchises, you build plants, your heads, I guess BSM and AA that were back in the day. They're charging quite high fees and they want you to stick around. So I guess for them, the last thing they want you to do is to leave and be successful on your own. They want to rely on them to a certain extent.
Yeah. And the guys that come in by themselves, so maybe the people not going into a franchise that are coming in independent or whatever it may be. Do you think that there's just not the realization of what it actually entails? Because you look at the stereotype of a driving instructor, you don't think business person, you think middle-aged white dude that just drives people about for a bit.
Yeah,
Do you think that it's that perception is actually has an impact on that?
yeah, I guess so. Um, and I think a lot do see it as just turn up, get in the car, do some lessons, go home. They don't even consider the wider things, sort of like you mentioned before about marketing. Yeah, it's not for everyone. It's not needed by everyone. And I guess the amount you need it is different at different times of your business and what you try to achieve. But yeah, very majority of people I would say do just get up, get in the car, go home, job done.
But coming back to your book then, because you mentioned that that part of the reason for writing that book, but what what was the big thing that made you write this specific type of book? Because as we said, it's about it's called "Are You Ready for Business?" and I think that kind of
Mm-hmm.
sums up what it's about. So, what actually drove you, excuse the pun, drove you to writing this book?
It was a bit of a lockdown project, to be honest. So my background is I'm a training instructor. I've still got my badge. I don't teach anymore, but it's still there at the moment. Taught since 2005. Like everybody else, come COVID, I wasn't working. It was around that time that I qualified as a bookkeeper. It was sort of a gradual transition between the two businesses. But it was really just thinking back to those early days. Like I said before, you get training to do part one, two, and three, and then things stop, and you either just go it alone, go independent straight away, which very few do. The majority go for a franchise. And it's looking at, okay, why are people doing that? And it's really just lack of education. So it's really just to fill that gap. It's not there as a answer every single question, but hopefully it's enough to sort of give you some pointers in the right directions and things to consider. So do you go franchise? Do you go and do what are the pros and cons of each? What do you do when you buy your first car? Do you lease it? Do you buy it? And it's hopefully just to give those new into the industry, and like yourself, people who have been there for a number of years, that bit more of an insight onto the business side of things.
I mean, I said this about a few things recently, actually, but reading this book, it's like I learned something new. I learn a different way of looking at something, and I
Mm-hmm.
get reassurance knowing that I'm doing something right. And I
Yeah,
think when something ticks all three of those boxes, it's a really good resource, and that's what I got from this. But I kind of want to come, and I know I'm talking generally here when I say this stuff, but I kind of want to come back to that general driving instructor aspect. And it feels to me like you're addressing in this book a lot of the mistakes that instructors make,
mm-hmm.
a lot of the areas where instructors struggle. So, do you want to just give the people listening kind of an idea of some of those weak points that we've got, if you think, from your perspective at least?
Yeah. So That's where to start. There's so many sort of little areas you could go down. I think for me, one of the big things is your car. Like I mentioned, just people don't always understand the difference between renting or leasing a car or going out and buying a car. And sometimes think, right, I go out, I spend £5,000 on a deposit for a new car. That's going to come off my accounts. It's not. It goes with a capital allowance, which I'm not going into the details of that today. But it's helping people to understand those different options. Also, misinformation. So quite often, I get pulled into debates on Facebook about people going, "Oh, I claim by mileage," which for a general company car or a business user is quite acceptable. But HMRC specifically stating it's easy to find on the Gov UK website. Driving instructors can't use a simplified mileage scheme. The point that you've got dual controls in your car makes it a plant and machinery rather than a vehicle for tax purposes. So yeah, you can't use that simplified. You've got to go down the capital allowance route, or you can lease a car, which is a little bit simpler to explain. It's just that then the cost of your lease gets taken off your profit for the year. So it's a little bit easier to understand. And again, we could go into loads of detail. It's something to talk about for hours, I guess.
I mean, just that example there on the mileage, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if someone's accountant has told them that they're allowed to claim that mileage, which obviously you're saying they can't, how would you respond to that person? Because they've been given, as you said, misinformation by their
Mm-hmm.
accountant on that.
It's pretty clear, and there's been a number of times I've just taken a screenshot of the Gov UK page, and it's quite a bold statement. It says, yeah, cars fitted with dual controls can't use the simplified mileage scheme. Obviously, it's then up to them how they interpret that and what they do and go back to their accountant and how that's dealt with. I think the problem lies is because the majority of accountants don't deal with driving instructors, or they might only deal with 2 or 3. So they just deal with it in the same way that they deal with any other client. Whereas in fact, it's sort of a totally different kettle of fish.
And you're sort of specialist in this area, aren't you?
Yeah, it's the background I've come from. So I still own a driving school now. I've got a few instructors that work for me in the local area. And it's something I've been quite passionate about, making sure we get that information right so everyone's singing off the same hymn sheet.
And I think now is probably the key time to look at the tax. We're coming into new tax year. We're in April now, and with something like that. So, you know, if someone's listening to this and they're now panicking and thinking, "Crap, I've been, looking at my mileage this way for forever,"
Mm-hmm.
would you just be sort of immediately advising them that they have, at the very least, have a discussion with their accountant about this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like I said before, a lot of the accountants are a bit naive that they don't know that information, and you don't know what you don't know at times. If you've always dealt with regular business users, you've never really had the need to search out why would it be different for a driving school. Most people wouldn't know that. So, yeah, it's time to have a conversation and make them aware. And there's adjustments that can be made. So it's not like a big panic. You're not going to get HMRC knocking on the door. But it's important you have that conversation so things are made right, and that accountants continue to do the right thing in the future.
Do you know, it's a very, I don't know what phrase, it's maybe a personal question from my perspective, because whenever I do my tax, I always panic. I mean, look, we've had this discussion recently about how unorganized I am with stuff, and I lose stuff, and stuff gets mislaid, receipts and whatnot. And there's been times I've put my tax in late, all this kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
I always have this panic that I'm going to wind up in jail because I've lost a receipt or something like that. And realistically, I would imagine you'd have to do something pretty significant for like, obviously you can get fined and stuff, but you'd have to do something pretty significant for any drastic action to be taken like that.
Yeah, it's really rare that as a small business owner you're going to get prosecuted. If HMRC, and they do random spot checks, traditionally they used to do quite a lot with driving instructors because it was a very cash heavy business. I know a lot of instructors have gone more onto card payments and online payments, bank transfers over recent years. I guess mainly COVID sped that up a bit. But yeah, it's just about having some sort of paper trail. And I guess going back to simple things like making sure you've got a separate bank account. It doesn't need to be a business bank account, it's just a separate account in your name so that you can see exactly the ins and outs. Things aren't murky. Because if HMRC come along and you're trying to show a personal statement and well, that was me, that was the missus, that was something else, and it gets really hard to justify your income and expenditure. So at that point, then you might end up with an adjusted tax bill, an extra tax down the line. Worst case, a small penalty. But I would imagine it's just really going to be expenses that if you can't prove them, you're not got to pay for trail. They're probably going to disallow them.
Yeah, and then I suppose above all else, it's the hassle and the stress that goes with that.
Yeah.
It's going to be a big thing. But I mean, you mentioned there about tax, and I think you mentioned digital. We're heading that way now, aren't we? So everything's got to be more digital tax wise.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a delay. It should have been right now. April 23 was going to be the big start date, and then it was put back and back. And I believe at the minute it's going to be from 2026 for sole traders. It's a bit different if you're VAT registered. That's already happened. So if you're VAT registered, then you need to go for tax digital now. But I can't imagine too many sole instructors are VAT registered. There's no real benefit. So yeah, there's a bit away yet, but we're still encouraging, especially the driving instructor clients, to try and go down the digital route. Just keeps everything tidy. If you get the software, it doesn't have to cost the bomb. You can get some software for sort of £5-10. If you've got a NatWest business account as well, they do a free agent subscription for free. It's included in the cost, so it's not an expensive avenue. But with that, it attaches your bank feeds attached to your accounting software, so it's really easy to just mark things off as they come along, attach the receipts, mark down your income. But then also you can keep a track of your accounts more easily on a regular basis throughout the year. You can look how you do, and you can start to put your tax away rather than getting to the end of the 12 months, or even still like no, you're just saying we're starting a new tax year. It hasn't officially got to be filed until the 31st of January next year. And a lot of people are waiting. Whereas if you're using that software, it's really easy to keep up to date. And then within sort of a couple of months, generally my sole trader clients, by May, June time, we've got everything done and dusted, and they know what the tax liability is, and they're all ready to go for the next year.
Yeah, I feel personally attacked there, Dave. I feel personally attacked.
I've been there, I've done it when I first started as an instructor, because it is one of those jobs you put off. You go out and you do your lessons in a day. And I've been there back in the early days before I had kids. I was doing maybe 8-10 lessons a day. Which a lot of people have forgotten about, but I think we've all been done it at some point. And the last thing you want to do is come back and sort your receipts out or get your bank statements out at the end of the month and reconcile them. So I've been there and done it and left it till January and then go, look at where I'm going to get that money from the tax bill from. So we just want to try and help people to avoid that.
I mean, look, I am better than I used to be, but I used to be atrocious, and now I'm just bad, I think. But I mean, I think that's something I actually want to just touch on for a second, is the idea of paying for your tax and how you pay for your tax. Because I know when I first started, I had this mentality that I know a lot of instructors have, which is, I'll fix it later, you know, and that you find out what your tax bill is, and then you somehow magic this money from somewhere. And we always manage to find it from somewhere, but that's an awful lot more stressful than it needs to be. And then I went through the process of, well, I know roughly how much my tax has been for the last couple of years, so I'll just divide that and, you know, save up monthly or weekly or whatever. And I've got a better way of doing it now. But do you think that it's important that we at least make some kind of plan to start putting that payment away early rather than waiting to end?
Yeah, absolutely. As a general guide, we'd say whatever you take in a week, if you put sort of 20 to 25% of that away, put in an ISA or a high value savings account, something that you don't need to touch for a little while. It is hopefully more than what you're going to pay, but at least then it's sat there and it's ready. As soon as the tax bill's in, you can pay it off straight away. You're not going to be panicking, and you're hopefully going to make a little bit of interest. If you put a bit too much in, hopefully at the end of the year, you've got a couple of £100, you can do what you want, go out for a nice meal, whatever. But we always try and encourage people to put it away regularly.
Yeah. And I don't want to get too much more into tax because we can let people into a little bit of an exclusive now in that you've agreed to come and do one of my expert sessions for me over in the Instructor Podcast Premium, and that's going to be in June, and it's going to be around tax and letting people, I know you're going to have a little presentation, but it's going to be more based on a Q&A, so people can come and join that in June. But you were talking a little bit about cars before and how to choose a car, and I found the bit in your book around cars really interesting because I think it's weirdly something that's glossed over a lot. And I know it was glossed over for me, when I started, and this isn't a criticism of Red, by the way, but I started with Red and they just gave me a car. I had
Yeah.
very little say in that. They had a way that I could pay extra, get my own car, whatever, but I had very little say in that. And I think that it's something that's glossed over, but it's something you go over quite comprehensively here. And why do you think that is glossed over so much? I mean, it's the thing we use more than anything else is our car, but often it seems to be the thing we think about the least.
Yeah. Again, it's one of those, I need a car, I'm just going to go out and get one. Or you might use the car that's already in your business. Not in your business, sorry, the car that you had before you qualified and just stick the jewels in. But it's quite often an afterthought. And to be honest, your accounts and your finances in general are. You sort of might get to the end of the first year and you might go, oh, I better find a bookkeeper or an accountant now. And I guess that's another myth. As sole traders, you don't always need an accountant. A well-qualified bookkeeper does everything that a sole trader could need. But I think, yeah, people just put it off. It's not glamorous. It's not going to. It's not like your marketing. Go, all right, I'm going to spend £100 on advert because it's going to get me some more business. If you pay your accountant, your bookkeeper, they're doing what needs to be done, but no one wants it to be done. It's just got to be done. And I think that's the trouble. It's just an afterthought.
We're just taking a slight pause in the show to give a quick shout out to the latest members of the Instructor Podcast Premium, the latest guys to sign up, and they are Murray Eden, Sean, Alan, Sally Morley, Wayne Smith, Anselm Kirsten, and Tim Gibson. These guys immediately get access to over 90 exclusive shows, and that could be audio, video content, and there's written content over there as well. They get access to that immediately to help them become better instructors, better coaches, and run better businesses. If those people have signed up to the interactive tier, they also get access to all the interactive content, including one that you guys may have heard recently, which was the breakdown of the first ever episode of the Instructor Podcast, and also the Green Room with Bob Morton. So you can see some of the episodes that we are getting our premium members involved in. They would also get access to expert sessions, the most recent one being with Chris Benstead on how to teach roundabouts. Really big audience for that one, and some awesome feedback. And the next one is going to be on May the 15th with Kev Tracey Field, giving us tips on how to help our students reduce those test day nerves. June, we'll see our very own Dave Shannon talking about tax. And in July, we're going to be joined by Ray Seagrave talking about the importance of rapport and how to build it up with your students. So if you want to get involved in any or all of this stuff, head over to www.theinstructorpodcast.com to find out more, potentially sign up. And if you would like to speak to me about it, feel free to drop me a message. But for now, let's dive back into the show. Just staying on the car for a second, you mentioned something in the book that I'm a big believer in, and I always talk to my students about, actually, because a lot of my students ask why I chose this car or whatever. They're always quite interested. And part of it always comes down to comfort. I'm potentially sat in that car, as you mentioned, you do the long days sometimes, whether we should do or not, it's a different topic, but we can be in that car for quite a long time sometimes in over a long period. And if you don't like it, or if it's not comfortable, then it's not a very nice place to be. And it's something that you mentioned in the book, and I was really pleased when I read it about that, taking into account how the car feels and how you're comfortable in it. How important is that in your opinion?
Yeah, absolutely. While I was teaching, I always felt like I went for decent cars. I had a couple of Fiestas, a couple of Audis, and the last car had an electric Mini. And I always went just on that slightly nicer car because you get that comfort, you get the optional little extras, you get your air conditioning and things like that, which, yeah, they're all a bit of an extra cost. But like you say, at the end of the day, you could be sat there for 5-10 hours a day. And it's madness because people happily go out and spend thousands and thousands on a sofa that you're probably going to sit on for an hour a night. Whereas they sort of scrimp on the car that you're going to be sat in there for the majority of the day.
Yeah.
So yeah, that definitely needs some consideration.
Yeah. Although it does amuse me when you'll see someone that's got brand spanking new like Audi or something like that, but the top box on top is that faded. You can't see the name, you can't see the L plate.
Mm,
But I think that comes under a lot of what your book is anyway. I'm not saying you mentioned this in the book, but it's that idea of the presentation. And you get this car, and you might spend ages choosing it, which is slightly contradictory to what I've just said, but you spend ages choosing it, and then you get this naffy little top box. I mean, I'm due a new one, a new top box, but that's another story. But so yeah, I think people's, as you said, they'll spend that much time choosing and that much money on a sofa, but they don't put the same consideration into their business. And do you think that's just a little bit like you said with a tax? It's a thing they don't want to do. It's the thing that isn't enjoyable. They're doing it because it's a job, or they're doing it because they need to, rather than, oh, well, how can I personalize this PC or whatever? Do you think there's an element
mhm.
of it's just a job there?
Yeah, I think certainly to an extent, some instructors will. It is, you just turn up. Yes, you can make it a decent living out of it by all means. And I totally understand some people will forego that comfort in the modern car because they want to earn a bit more money and a bit more profit at the end of it. And I get that too. It's a tough one, really. I guess it's horses for course, isn't it? Some people are just not bothered. They'll get in whatever's going. I've known instructors run cars for like 200,000 miles, and fair play to them. It's kept their expenses down, but then on the flip side, it's what you're comfortable in, what your pupils are going to be comfortable in.
Yeah. Um, Coming back to the book, then, you've got a section in the book on business plans,
Mm-hmm.
and this intrigues me. And I think it intrigues me because I think that when a lot of people think about a business plan, they assume that's something that Microsoft or Apple do. They don't assume it's something driving instructors should do. But
Mm-hmm.
as we mentioned before, as a driving instructor, I know there are some exceptions, like instructors are employed, but 90% of instructors are self-employed.
Yeah.
So I suppose there's a two-part question for you of what do you mean when you talk about a business plan, and why do instructors need one?
Okay. So a business plan doesn't need to be one piece. It doesn't need to be a massive essay. So back in the day, people would be going to the bank with pages and pages of paper. Um, it's just about having that goal and that target. Where do you want to take your business? Generally, we start with probably a 3-year plan. And what I always advise is start at the furthest point away and then work backwards. So where do you see yourself and your business in 3 years? So for some, they're quite happy to be just on their own, just making a decent living. So it might be they want to see the turnover increase. So it's looking at, okay, so where can I increase costs? How can I add value to the business? It might be someone who wants to build a school. That was always one of my things. I started working for a local school when I first qualified, but I always had that vision of building my own school. So it's okay, in 3 years' time, where do you want your business to be? Do you want 5 instructors? Do you want 10 instructors? And then it's working backwards then. So, okay, in 12 months' time, what can I be doing now? So that in 12 months' time, I've maybe got my first instructor, maybe 2 or 3, or I've got 1 in training. And then working back there. So 90 days, what do I need to do? Okay, so I probably need to learn how to train instructors, or I need to sort of find an instructor to train who'll do that on my behalf. 30-day plan then coming forward is doing that bit of research. To your 7 days is just your basic formation ideas. And it's just taking all those longer term visions and then work backwards and make little decisions on how you're going to reach that point. So I say a business plan isn't going to be massively in detail. I think there are some templates downloaded in the book. I can provide a link for those. And just keep reviewing it. So with your shorter targets, your 7 day, your 30 days, you've got to keep reviewing those on a regular basis. But your 12 months, maybe 6 months down the line, jump in. Okay, how am I doing compared to those targets? What have I done? And most people, I'm going to be honest, won't do anything. They write these big goals down. Yeah, I'm going to achieve this, and then 6 months down, I go, I'm no closer than I was before. So it is about having a bit of drive as well to follow up on your plans. Because if you don't, nothing's going to happen. And it's just constantly having that fresh in your mind, I guess.
Yeah, I think you make some really good points there, and one particularly powerful bit is like that "what can I do now" aspect. I mean, just to let you on all the listeners into a little secret, a lot of people will be aware that my life changed significantly last year, and divorce, bereavements, move home, all that kind of stuff. And earlier on this year was when I had to completely reevaluate my business and life plan. And if anyone sees anywhere like a little phrase or a hashtag that's hashtag Terry45, that's my 5 year plan. I've got a 5 year plan of where I'm going to be at 45, what I'm going to do. And it's essentially how I run my day. My day is this conducive to my Terry 45 or not? And
Yeah.
that's how I'm focused at the minute. It's very much like laser focus. And I don't think that's judgmental on anyone, because if someone's 3 or 5 or 10 year plan is that they they want to be delivering driving lessons sort of 9 till 5 and chilling on sofa with family and evening and weekend, nothing's
Yeah.
wrong with that, but that's your plan. So what are you doing towards that plan? Or vice versa, if you're planning world domination, what are you doing towards that? And you mentioned there about the resource you offer. It's something I noticed in the book. I should have mentioned it earlier, actually. There's lots of sort of downloadable links you've got in there. So, bonus content and bonus resources as well. What was the idea behind that? Is that just giving people a bit extra?
Yeah, because it's easy to talk about things like we said about the business plans there, but it's the reality of actually making that work and actually doing something about it. And the really easy things you can just download and print them off. It's 4 or 5 sheets of paper, and you can just keep updating, and it's about making it accessible. The page, you could literally get 5 pieces of paper and put the headings on. It's just trying to make it as easy as possible for people to be able to do it. I think that's the key: is get out there, have a go. There's no right or wrong with your business plan. It's your ideas. It's what you want to achieve.
I keep asking you this question, and maybe I'm wrong to do so. I don't know, but do you think that's something that's missing in a lot of our industry? That business plan aspect of it.
Yeah, I think it's just that drive, like we talked about at the beginning. People don't see themselves as business owners, even those that go, "Oh, yeah, I'm self-employed." They don't realize, yes, I've got a business, and at the end of the day, a business aim is to make profit, wherever that might be. You winding down to retirement. You see a lot of older instructors who've had great jobs, who've maybe been made redundant, and they just want a few quid to go on holiday every year. Great. Your plan might be, okay, I want to have an extra week's holiday next year. I'm going to achieve that. You might be at the early end edge of the scale. I was 25, I think, when I started as an instructor. So for me, it was to create a decent wage that I could support a family growing up. So it's totally individual. But yeah, it's people got to realize that they've got a business and what they're going to do with it.
I think it's fascinating. And, my example here will be this podcast. This podcast doesn't make me any money. It's a hobby. It's not a business. If it was a business, it would be money. The Instructor Podcast Premium, which is a membership, that earns me money. That's a business. But this podcast, if that business was to die, I would continue doing this podcast as my hobby. And I think that's the difference between the two as I see it. Does that sound sort of a good summary of that?
Yeah, definitely. I think sometimes you do things just for the love of it, don't you?
Yeah.
And if it's something you enjoy doing, then great. Obviously, if it can make you a bit of money on the side, then even better. But yeah, I think you've really got to enjoy what you're doing.
And just to put you on the spot a little bit, what could we do to improve this industry? So for people coming into the industry, anyone coming in new, to get them looking at this more, the more business side of it, like they're owning a business, what could the likes of me and you do? I know that you've obviously got your bookkeeping service, and there's obviously a podcast and whatnot, but what can we actually do? Have you got any ideas around that?
I think it's getting the business process integrated and almost maybe not the qualification process, but those training providers, getting those to include some sort of business training within what they're doing. I know Chris Benstead's looking at things like that. I know Lou and Blaine Walsh include some of those elements in their course, and I'm sure there's others that do. But I guess ultimately it's getting the industry as a whole to recognise this should be a part of training. It's not just about training to be an instructor; it's training to be a business owner.
No, I'd agree. And we can shout from the rooftops as much as we want, but I think that you're right. We need I suppose anyone that's training someone to involve that one way or another, rather than come and train with me for £100 and I'll teach you everything you need to know. Um, I want to talk a little bit about the bookkeeping side of stuff because you mentioned this before about the bookkeeping and accountants. What's the difference between a bookkeeper and an accountant?
So everyone sees the accountant as like the go-to person. And it's quite often people say, "Oh, you're in business, you need an accountant." An accountant can give tax advice. So if you're making huge profits, so like the small and medium-sized businesses are going to have hundreds of thousands, but they can give advice on, okay, well, you could invest in this and that, or we could make it more tax efficient by putting it here and wrapping things up and that sort of thing. Accountants are great with that. There's different levels of bookkeepers, so it's important to do your research. So myself, I'm with the ICB, which is the Institute of Certified Bookkeepers. I'm as qualified as you can be with them. So I can do anything for small businesses, submit your self-assessments. I can prepare limited company accounts, but I can't file them yet. That has to go through an accountant. But for your day-to-day tasks, a bookkeeper does absolutely everything. Certainly as a driving instructor that you would need.
So, what would your average ADI use you for?
It's just keeping things up to date, asking questions. I think it's important to have that. Have someone there that you can just come to. Listen, I'm going to buy a new car. I'm thinking of this, or I might lease it, and it's someone to run options by. So having sort of an ear to chew, if you like, and then just being on top of the accounts. So sort of a mid-year checkup and go, okay, how things are going this year? Let's look at the accounts, sort of mid-year profit and loss, so you've got an idea where your tax is. And then at the end of the year, getting stuff done relatively quickly, rather than sort of dragging it out. And sometimes just having that accountability, someone saying to you, come on, end of year's here now, let's get these accounts done. So certainly for us as a relatively small practice, we've got that time to just spend with the clients and we can say, yeah, come on, it's April now, you finish your tax year, where's your stuff? Rather than waiting until December or January. I searched on the new tax year, the 6th of April. I never knew but I searched it. It's actually 300 days to get your tax return in, which is massive. So you can either spend 300 days doing nothing and having a big panic at the end, or you can spend it proactively, getting your stuff done and getting on top of things and have everything filed in line, know what your tax is, and you can relax almost. And that's what we try and do for the clients.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to focus on another way that my brain works at the minute, which is I look after Terry on Friday. So I don't want Terry on Friday, which is usually my day off, to have a stress day off. I want him to have a day off that he's going to enjoy. But if I put stuff off through the week, I'm going to have to do it on Friday. And Terry on Friday is going to be annoyed about that. So I look after Terry on Friday so I can have that nice Friday. And that's how I view everything. That's what you're saying there. I'm looking after Terry in January by doing that stuff now. And it did amuse me slightly there with the old the accountability comment because following our discussion, the email I got from you the other day saying, if I haven't replied to it by this day, as discussed, I will give you a little nudge for you.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I need. But again, I'm going to put you on the spot slightly, and apologies for keep doing this, Dave, but why should people use you? Why should driving instructors come to you? Do you know what I mean? Rather than going to someone else, why should they come to you?
Okay. It's just our background. Yeah, I've come from a driving instructor background for let's say 2005 we qualified. So I know the business side of things. I've been there, I've done it. I've been a franchise instructor. I still own a franchise, so I know what's going on in the business. I understand the day-to-day of things. I know the right regulations that a lot of accountants don't seem to, judging on a lot of the comments that go along on Facebook. It's just having an expert on your side. Majority of bookkeepers I know, I haven't got any driving instructor clients, I might have one. So again, you fall down that pitfall of, do they know everything that's relevant to your business? Which we do.
And I just want to come back to the book for another moment because this book was first published in 2021, and you kind of told us why you did it. It was just a few kind of reasons there. What feedback have you had on the book so far?
Really good. It's a mix of I've had new instructors that are going through the qualifying process. Like we give it to our ADI or PDIs as they go through the journey, and and even experienced ADIs with sort of years of experience have still taken something from it. Because, like you say, quite often you get in the car and you just crack on being an instructor. You don't think about the business side of things. And there's little bits in there for everyone. So some of it, yes, as an experienced instructor, um, the qualifying process isn't relevant to you. Fine, you can gloss past that. But there's bits about advertising and marketing, to capital allowances on your cars, to how your self-assessments worked out. So there's a little bit for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of covers 5 key topics. So getting started, the business plan, the marketing, the finances, and health and well-being. And I was really pleased to see someone on health and well-being as well. That actually cheered me up quite a bit. Is there anything else you'd add on? So now, sort of 2 years down from writing it, is there a part 6 in there that you'd add on, or do you think that as it is now still stands?
I think maybe a little bit of planning for the unexpected. I think I do gloss over it in the book a little bit because obviously it was written in COVID, so there's a little bit of a mention to that in there. But yeah, just I'll probably go into a bit more detail on the financial planning for individuals. And the majority of it still stands out as it is. I think probably in 10 years' time, the majority of it is still going to be relevant. But yeah, just a bit more updates on the planning side of things and preparing for the worst, I guess.
Right. Is there anything else you want to touch on today around sort of the business, the basics of running a driving school, if you like?
I think it's just don't be afraid to ask questions. But find people that you trust in business, which can be difficult. Even in our business now, we work with different people. We work with a business coach. We work with marketing people because you can't do everything on your own. And it's important to look at when you do that business plan and those bigger goals to go, okay, so what can I do, but also what can't I do? An example, when I first started my own driving school, it's like, oh, I'm not going to spend a few £100 on a website. So I taught myself how to code a website. It sort of it did the job, but it wasn't great. And it's important to recognise those times where it's like, okay, I could do it, but do I really want to be doing it, or could someone do it better? Yeah, something a little bit more efficient. But I guess going off on a tangent is something, a comment you made earlier on about the targets, about having that focus. Was it Terry 45?
Terry 45, yeah.
Yeah, I've sort of got off on tangent a bit from where we're. There's Olympic athlete, trying to remember his name, Ben Hunt Davis, I think it was. He had this talk, it was, will it make the boat go faster? He was part of an Olympic team and they had an awful Olympics, really bad results. So for the next 4 years, that team, their mantra is, will it make the boat go faster? So every decision they make, it's like, okay, Friday night, they will go down the pub. Will it make the boat go faster? No. Okay, let's skip the pub. We'll be ready for training a bit earlier on Saturday. Yeah, should we do this? Should we go to the gym or should we go for a run? What's going to benefit us most? I know this isn't related to our businesses as such, but it's just constantly thinking of, okay, here's what I'm doing now useful to our end results. So looking at your business plan, if you've got in 12 months, you want to be first PDI, is the courses you're in, are the people you're talking to the right people that are going to help you to get there? Or are you wasting your time? Or could someone be helping you to get along that path a bit quicker?
I actually think that is massively related to our business because I think it relates to any business. You know, it's that even just to the premise of you've got a lesson at 8 o'clock in the morning, let's not get leather tonight. You know, what's going to help you deliver that lesson better? And I forget what podcast I heard it on, but I had a brilliant phrase the other day. And decide what you're going to be shit at. If you're struggling to decide what you're going to be good at, decide what you're going to be crap at. So, you know, I mentioned before about Terry 45. I'm trying not to make this a podcast about me, by the way. But it's like my priorities over the next couple of years, at least, it's around business. It's around, you know, growing my business, my driving school, the podcast, all this kind of stuff. And it's around my physical and mental health as well.
Yeah.
So there's other stuff that's pushed aside. And I'm consciously choosing that I'm not going to be very good in these areas because I won't have time to put on everything. So I'm going to have to sacrifice time from A, B, and C to put into D, E, and F. And I think that's ties in with what you're saying. Do you want to deliver the best driving lesson you can? Right. Well, is getting levered going to contribute towards that? Is getting a good night's sleep going to contribute towards that? And that's not saying you can never have a late night. It's saying that what are you going to do consistently? So I genuinely think that's a really good point you made. And it's always interesting when I can tell what quote I'm going to use from the show, and it's going to be that it's asking people you trust.
Yeah.
Because everyone says ask questions. I love the fact you put that caveat on there because you mentioned before about some of the accountants that are giving bad advice, and you go on a Facebook group and ask a question, and watch what answers you get. So, where's the best place to find people you can trust, Dave? There's a question for you.
Yeah. Well, some of it's going to be ask other professionals around you. Yeah, it's doing your research a bit. I suppose it depends what you're looking for, isn't it? It's like when people want a trade, like a plumber or a builder, you always ask your mates first. Still looking for a plumber, do you recommend anyone? And it's no different. Yes, speak to other people who are successful in the field you're in. Okay, and have that question out. How did you get to where you are now? Because the majority are quite happy to tell you and to share their experience. So they might say, "Oh, well, I spent X amount of time with a business coach," and they might share those details with you. And it's looking for those people who are already at success and are where you want to be, and ask them for a starter, I guess.
Yep. And just a cheap plug for a second for anyone listening. I think there's about 122 episodes of this podcast now, and there's a shed load of experts on there, including yourself, Dave. So I can find these people. All right. So, last couple of questions that we like to finish on. What is your ultimate driving song that I'm going to add to the Instructor Podcast Spotify playlist?
Okay. So I didn't want to go down the cheesy route, the sort of things everyone will go for. There's a band probably most people have heard called Greta Van Fleet. Been around a few years now. They've got a great song called Highway Tune.
Right.
Certainly want to get you nodding along.
Well, it's not often someone names a tune that I haven't heard before, so I'll look forward to digging that one out. And you can either expect a very positive or a very negative message later on. And then the other question is this podcast, if you find it on Spotify, you can find they put polls and questions up on there. So is there a question or a poll you'd like us to put on Spotify aimed at the driving instructor audience?
Yeah. I guess when did you last submit? Yeah, what month did you submit your last tax return in?
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Yeah.
I'll put that up and we'll see how that goes. All right. So, do you want to tell everyone where they can find you to get more Dave Shannon goodness?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the business is Drive Ahead Bookkeeping. Website is driveaheadbookkeeping.co.uk. Contact details there, emails, phone numbers. And the book is on Amazon only. It's you can either download it as a Kindle or you can order it. And it's Are You Ready for Business?
Awesome. And as always, you'll be able to find links for that in the show notes and on the transcript blog, even over on the instructorpodcast.com website. And as we mentioned before, you'll be joining us again in June to deliver the expert session. Are you looking forward to that one?
Yeah, absolutely. It's always good to get a good presentation and get a good crowd.
Yep. Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing your time today. As always, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, no problem at all. Cheers, Terry. Thank you.
So a big thank you to Dave Shannon there. Another episode I really enjoyed recording and listening back to, and I hope you guys did too. It was good to get into the kind of the fundamentals of running a driving school business, and I would very much appreciate your feedback if you would like more episodes like this around some of the business side of becoming a driving instructor. But as mentioned in the show there, you'll have heard it, Dave is coming on in June to talk about tax, the do's and don'ts for driving instructors, what we can and can't claim for. He's going to be delivering a presentation followed up by taking your questions. To get access to that and the other expert sessions we have coming up, you'll need to sign up to the Instructor Podcast Premium. Head over to www.theinstructorpodcast.com, or you can check out the links in the show notes and sign up over there. For £22 a month, you get access to all the expert sessions, you get all the interactive content, you get all the merchandise, and you get all the exclusive shows we do as well. If you don't want the interactive stuff, you can just sign up for £10 a month, and that gives you all the pre-recorded podcasts, all the exclusive shows, and you get all the discounts with Go Roadie, Client-Centered Learning, the ADI PDI Doctor, San Harper's Mindfulness courses, and of course, Coaching for Geeks Turbo. Now, you may have noticed this week there is no bonus bit at the end with another driving instructor. I was a bit behind this week, but they will be back soon. However, next week, I am going to be live at the Intelligent Instructor and ADI NJC conference on Sunday the 23rd. So there will be a slightly different episode out next week, and I will leave that there, and you guys can find out what that is. But for now, I just want to say have an awesome day, and remember, if you're not enjoying your lessons, you're doing it wrong.
The Instructor Podcast with Terry Cook, talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.